out there, and Happy New Year! Happy 2017 to all my subscribers and all my followers on my YouTube channel, Ham Radio Man Oz. Thank you for watching. Unfortunately, this is not a good start to the year for me. I have created the cardinal sin of radio repair, and not a very pleasant way to start the year. I actually was trying to present you a video on changing the LEDs in my RCI 2950, and I started working away on the radio and pulled the display out and everything was fine, and pulled off the lamps and soldered a couple of wires on where the lamps were and put it on the multimeter to test the voltages. Tested a couple of LEDs to see that they were working fine with the voltages and the brightness, and everything was working fine. Then I dropped the display. I dropped it, it hit the bench and cracked. And I just could shoot myself for doing that. So now, unfortunately, I still have a working radio, but half the display is all cracked, and I'll show you that momentarily. But I learnt. Now, if it had just hit the carpet on the floor instead of the bench, it would have been fine, you know. But I learnt a very valuable lesson out of this. Not only will I have to hunt around for a spare display and eventually repair the display, I thought I'd found two on the internet under Rooster's CB radios. He was showing two of them. I got in touch with the guy straight away. Unfortunately, he doesn't have those parts at all. So I'm looking around. So if anyone out there has an old Ranger RCI 2950 that they no longer want, whether it's working or not, as long as the display is intact, please get in touch with me, because I'd like to purchase that from you for parts. So I will repair this radio one day. Unfortunately, it's going to have to sit there now with a non-functional display. The radio still works and everything functions, but the display is cracked. So what do we do? So what did I learn from that experience? Well, the thing that I knew in my mind to do whenever you're handling liquid crystal displays is to put some tape across the display. Some electrical tape, put it across the display, around the display, even put a bit of foam tape to it. If you're not going to work on the liquid crystal display itself, put a bit of foam over it to protect it in case you accidentally drop it. Why didn't I do that? I don't know. I committed the cardinal sin. So let this be a lesson to everybody out there when you're repairing radios or working on any radio or any radio device that has a liquid crystal display. If you're going to be working around that display, put foam over it, tape it, make sure that it's so protected in case you accidentally drop it. And it just slipped out of my hands, and that was the bottom line. So I'm pretty miffed at myself, to say the least. So instead of presenting you a video on changing the LEDs, and eventually, yes, I did get the LEDs working. I haven't changed the little ones down the bottom of the display board, which I was going to do. I found that there's a few things, because I'd never actually pulled it apart before, that the actual RCI 2950 is put together very well. The display unit itself has two displays that actually pop off with pins. They just pull straight out, and they've just got little plugs that are already on the other side, and you just plug them straight back in. Very easy to work with. Unfortunately, yes, the cardinal sin, I broke the liquid crystal display. I don't know how to repair them, so I'm just going to have to hunt around for a display and hopefully one day find one. Luckily for me, it's a radio that I don't use very often at all. I've only ever used it for a bit of 10-meter work, but I can use my other radios for that, and used it mobile. I can put a frequency counter on it and transmit, and I'll know what frequency I'm on. I could even hardwire in a frequency counter one day. I might even think about looking at if there's an option to replace the whole display and make it LEDs. I don't know if I can do that, but that's something I'll research and see to have a look at. In the meantime, in this video, I do present you with one other tip. That's a soldering tip, and we'll show you that. So when you're soldering stuff, one of the most important things is to make sure your soldering iron is very, very hot. That's very important because you don't want to be holding a soldering iron on, waiting for the solder to melt and hoping that you'll get a good connection. Have it hot. You can see the soldering iron I've got there is set on 340 degrees and it's quite hot. So I've actually done my little bit of soldering with that at the moment. So I'll turn that off for now and I'll come back with the second part of this. So just turn that off to let it cool down for a bit. Now the other important tip about soldering, of course, is to make sure you have a good solder. In this case, I bought these ones. I bought several solders on eBay recently. This one here is a 6040, which is what I prefer to work with, and most people seem to work with. 6040, and it's very, very thin. It's so thin, it's almost a little bit thicker than hair. It's a very, very thin solder, and it works extremely well with a hot soldering iron. Now I bought another few. I bought 5 of these ones on eBay as well, and you can see there it says 4060. I don't know if you can see that, but it says 4060 rosin core. Now I'm not sure whether they meant 6040 because I think it's 4060, so it doesn't work as well. So this one is a 1mm in diameter and it's 18 grams. So I bought 5 of these. They were cheap, but it's not very good at all. The other one that I have, which I don't really like to use, is a lead-free one, which came with my soldering station that I bought recently. And lead-free, well, it doesn't seem to be the best way to go either. So just avoiding that. So a 6040 thin solder. That was only about $1 or something on eBay. Probably I'd prefer to go to J-Car or visit a local supplier to get solder, and it's very important. And the other thing that we always need to have when we're soldering is a multimeter. You don't need a multimeter to solder, ham radio man. No, of course not. What you need it for is to check your connections for continuity. Now, as radio people, we should all know about continuity when you're connecting or soldering PL259 connections. So here's one I've just recently done because I'm working on this now to put on a new antenna. Now it's not the perfect solder job because what you want to make sure of is that you do have a good connection on the end, but you don't want to constantly apply too much heat to the center tip as you're soldering, because what you'll do is you'll melt the plastic inside on your coax, and it'll then short with your earth. So I try to do a quick heat job, and if it's a little rough on the edges, I can just file that away, or use a Stanley knife or a hobby knife and just scrape away on the side of it till I'm sure that it's going to be nice. Now, when I check continuity, I like to use an adapter. And what I mean by that is I have a few of these different types of adapters, like angle adapters or whatever. The first thing you want to make sure is you check your adapter isn't shorting. So you do a continuity test on that to make sure that it's not shorting. So let's do that, and I'll show you a very simple thing. So I'll get my multimeter. I get the centerpiece here. If I can do this one-handed, and there we go. Now, alright, that's showing because what's happening is the probe is connecting in. So here's a simple trick. An alligator clip, a piece of wire. Just a short, tiny piece of wire on an alligator clip. This will solve a lot of headaches for you. That way you can then put the alligator clip, as you can see there, on the end. And now, when you do your continuity test, you can check the center is all working nicely. Alright, now let's check the earth, and we should have nothing there, and that's good. So we know the adapter's not shorting out, and we know that the connection's good. So grab your connector, your adapter, and your connector that you've just done, and of course you can put a multimeter on here and then the other end of the coax, and also on the earth here and that, to make sure it's not shorting out. But I like to make sure first of all it's going to fit into of course, the connector I'm going to plug it into, whether it's an antenna or whatever. So I like to make sure that it plugs in there nicely, and we screw it up tight. Now when we do a continuity test, I like to put my alligator clip on the center there. Now I'll bring out my little helping hands here to actually help me. Hello helping hands. Hello ham radio man. Thank you for that. Can you hold my coax for me? Of course I can. Oh, that's lovely. Okay. Alright. You go mad after a while, you know, when you work with radio. Okay, so now I've got that held in place, and I'll move that back a little bit so you can see better. Oh, Ham's little thing is falling over. Let's see if we can get that in a good shot. Okay, so first thing I'm going to check is that there's no connection between the earth and that center pole. So I'm going to choose the earth, of course, on the PL259. That's what I want. Okay, so we have no shorting going on, which is good. Now I'll check the earth is going through the adapter and the earth on the PL259, which it is. Oh, there we go, just get the probes in the right spot. So that's good. So the earth connection is good. Good earth connection, and we don't have any shorting of the earth in any way, shape or form. Good. Now once I'm sure that that part's done, I grab the other end of the coax that I'm working on, so this is the one that is yet to have a plug put on it, and now I will check to make sure, and this is I advise just to do for the double safety aspect of it. I will make sure that the center connection is going right through. I'll make sure that the center connection is going right through with a good continuity there from the adapter right through to the other end of the coax. So let's do that. And as you can see, yes it is. The alligator clip just came off, but that tested out quite nicely. So now I know my center connection is extremely good and there's no shorting of the earth. Now what a lot of people don't do, and what I always recommend you do once you finish any sort of PL259 connection, because I prefer to use these screw-in ones. They screw in the earth and solder at the tip. Sorry, I'll show you that again. Screw at the earth, they screw into it, and of course then you have your centerpiece. So I prefer to use these ceramic ones, the ceramic Bakelite ones. They have a screw-in end on the end of it, so you can screw the earth into it, and then you get your soldering point in the end. Now, before I do all that, I get a piece of heat shrink. And a lot of people don't put heat shrink onto their connectors. They use tape. Well, that's fine, you can use electrical tape if you want. I prefer to use some heat shrink, pop that over, and I'm going to use my hot air gun to shrink that down onto that. Now that's probably a little bit big, that heat shrink. I probably could have used smaller, but it was very hard to find some smaller around. So what I also do is I can put a smaller piece of heat shrink on the inside of that. I'll just feed it through the other end of the coax, and then I'll melt that down so we can see what the end result is. Okay, so there we are. So I've just now heat shrinked the end of it, and I'll put a little bit of electrical tape, just a little bit around the end of it as well, just to flow onto the coax so that it's nice and held waterproof. And I've used a smaller piece just inside and a bigger piece outside onto the connector, and be careful when you're doing that you don't overheat it, otherwise you'll just burn the heat shrink. Once it's shrunk down, it'll shrink down as far as it'll go. It doesn't take long. I use my hot air gun for that one. Very nice and easy. So that's Ham Radio Man Oz soldering tip number 1, making connections for PL259s. Hope you like that. We'll come up with another tip for you very soon. this is all there is to this video. Just to say a simple lesson learnt, and please make sure that if you're working on radios, that you are a bit more careful. I'm normally a lot more careful than that, but I just don't know why I didn't follow my instinct to put the foam and tape on it. So a lesson learnt, sadly the hard way, and a hard way to start the year 2017. Anyway, in the meantime, keep it real. This is Ham Radio Man Oz, and this has been episode 15, and we will catch up again soon with some exciting stuff. In the meantime, 73s, cheers, all the best.